Thank you. Good evening. This is a public hearing dated January 4th, 2024 for the Genesee Community Charter School, Flower City Campus. The public hearing is now open. The Education Law Subdivision 2857-1 and regulations of the Commission of Education 8 NYCRR Section 119.4 require the board to conduct a public hearing within 30 days of receipt of notice of an application for a new or revised charter school. The Rochester City School District Board of Education is conducting this public hearing regarding a charter school revision for the Genesee Community Charter School, Flower City Campus. This hearing aims to gather community input to provide to SUNY Charter School Institute. Genesee Community Charter School, Flower City Campus, a charter school education corporation authorized by the State University of New York, located at 1100 South Goodman Street, Rochester, New York, 14620 in the Rochester City School District, seeks to merge with Genesee Community Charter School, a charter school education corporation authorized by the New York State Board of Regents, located at 657 East Avenue, Rochester, New York, 14607, such that when the merger is approved, Genesee Community Charter School, Flower City Campus would be the successor education corporation under the proposed name, Genesee Community Charter Schools. Is there anyone here to speak at this public hearing on behalf of this revised charter school? Hearing none, this public hearing is now closed. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the special meeting of the Board of Directors. This evening, we'll be discussing the board goals, but we also have a conversation around the East EPO. And so I want to start off, first of all, by acknowledging that we have Commissioners LeBron and Griffin, who are going to be with us on Zoom. They're not able to be here in person. But I also want to recognize our new fiscal monitor, Mark Potter, who's also joining us tonight along with the state monitor, Eliseo. So I want to just welcome them here, and also want to welcome the folk from the U of R also who are here. And thank you for coming. So we will start, however, with the board goals and having some conversations around that. And then the next item on the agenda will be the East EPO. So we will start with the board goals, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Pluso.
Thank you, President Elliott. Good evening. I would like to just start tonight. We've had some conversations around board goals. I've received some feedback on some initial drafts, and tonight I put together just a few slides of some English language arts, some math, and potentially some high school graduation goal, high school metrics that could be student outcome goals like we're looking to do. I know we're trying to be around 3 to 5 of them, but wanted to put something on paper to kind of help guide our discussion today. So if you look at the first page, which is our English language arts, and what I'll do is I'll just run quickly through these goals and then open it up for any discussion the board wants to have, or any, any modifications or any questions they may have. But for English language arts, I looked at a goal to increase the percentages of students in grades 3 through 8 who are proficient on the New York State ELA assessment from 16% to 40% by June 2028. So that is a long-term goal. From within there, right, then myself, the team would have to create interim goals and interim metrics to make that goal for 2028. Also, that would be inclusive of the strategic planning, and then we would address priorities from our stance of how we would achieve those goals. Another example of a goal that could be around English language arts would be if we wanted to concentrate just on third grade, all students reading by third grade, increase the percentage of students proficient on the third grade in New York State ELA assessment from 15% where we currently are to 50% by June 2028. As I go through these, right, as we use ELA assessment data, the state average has hovered around 40%. It is a normed test. I would love to say 100% on all of those, but they'll never be 100% in the district because it's a normed assessment. And therefore, there's going to be some varying degrees of level 1s, 2s, and 3s, and 4s, dependent on how students perform. If we take a look at the math goals, I've included a math New York State assessment, increase the percentage of students in grades 3 through 8 who are proficient on the New York State math assessment from 14% to 40% by 2028. And then also to increase the percentage of students passing the Algebra Common Core exam from 29% to 50% by 2028 as well. And then for high school, and we've talked and I heard, we've had goals typically around graduation rates, and maybe that's not directly student outcome related, right, and student goal related. So really taking a look at what leads to graduation. So I have one here, the increase of number of students earning 5 or more credits in 9th grade. We know if our students come in and they're at 5 credits during their 9th grade year, they're going to be more successful. To increase that rate from 70% to 90% by June 2028. Increase the percentage of students earning additional distinction. So, as we know, there's going to be some potential to be some micro-credentials if the state changes how they provide diplomas, but we do have biliteracy, we do have career and civic readiness, we have advanced regents right now, to increase that, to demonstrate our students taking higher level courses from 12% to 40%. And then also, if you just want to take a look at higher level course offerings, right? Because you also have some of our students that graduate within 3 years, and we really want them to stay and take some higher level courses. Do we look at the increased percentage of students participating in advanced level courses, AP, IB, dual credits from 18% to 40% by June of '28. So I put June of '28 out there as a year for a benchmark, put some metrics there to kind of help us guide the discussion and really move away from those initial ones that we have based on the feedback that we received from that preliminary discussion.
So I'll open it up. Let me go to the screen first, to the Zoom. Vice President LeBron, you have any questions at this point for the superintendent regarding his recommendations for goals?
No, not at this time. Thank you, President Elliott.
Hope you're feeling better.
Thank
Commissioner Griffin, do you have any reaction to what the superintendent is proposing? All right, we'll go down to Commissioner Malloy. Yeah.
Perfect. Can you hear me? Awesome. First and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for getting that feedback from the board and then adjusting those numbers. But in looking at these numbers, those are really lofty projections. First, because there are suburban districts that don't even have a 40% proficiency on that New York State ELA exam. And so I think just as a teacher, I want to know, are there other measures of reading proficiency, English language proficiency, math proficiency that we could use instead of that specific exam to go from 16 to 40? And I'm all for increasing proficiency, but I did a little research in between that time, and even within the district that I work for, you don't see necessarily those same percentages. So I think my concern is, do we want to rely our goals or make our goals and surround our goals by that specific assessment? And if maybe there's a better measure, I would love to say, 75% of all of our students will be reading on grade level by this and this date. I don't know if there's a way that we could measure that. Is that a better measure? Again, I think I love that we want to increase those.
Great question, and one that we struggle with. We see average increases of 3%, right? That's what we typically see, 3 to 5% range of what is an average percentage increase. I think in this, I'm shooting for 8, right? Because sometimes a little bit higher, because we have to accelerate some level of this in the speed of it. I do agree that we could take a look at iReady data. But when I come out and report on my goals at iReady data that are going to report differently than ELA proficiency on New York State exam, does that send a mixed message? Does it confuse people? Does it seem as if, as a district, we're trying to say something that may not be accurate, right? I'm trying to elude the measure. The one measure that's constant across the state is how our students perform on the ELA.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, I would love there to be another metric. Yes, these are aggressive, but remind you, when I first put something down of 8 to 10 to 15% over 5 years, that's probably not aggressive enough for us to get to a place we need to get to.
Okay, thank you.
So I would just sort of add to that. Remember when we came in with these sort of goals that we didn't think were ambitious enough? We sent it back to the district superintendent and his team, and so they've come up with these what I think are, in my mind, great goals, because we're talking about to 2028. And so I would not want us, because of the fact that we are in such dire straits and our community is expecting us to make sure that we're educating our kids, I would like us to be aggressive. We charged the board with increasing those percentages, and I just wanted to put that on the table, that, we sent them back to say, be more, well, we didn't say be more aggressive, but we wanted more increased measures. So I just want to put that on the table. Commissioner Simmons?
Yes, President Elliott. So I agree with some of the sentiments expressed, and as far as, I love that you went back to the drawing board, because the original goal of 25% wasn't gonna work for me. And when I translated that, I thought about raw numbers, and I remember saying, how many children are we saying we're okay with not reading? And 40% is not great, but as we know, if you're looking at SMART goals, you're looking at something that's attainable and incremental, and that is, a much better spectrum. Have we looked at other districts, like in the Big Five, Syracuse, things of that nature, and have we been able to see how they've measured out over time? Like, have we looked at someone who started at a 12% and maybe they weren't even at 12%, you know what I mean? And within a 3 or 5 year period where they ended up?
I think if we look at our Big Five counterparts, right, they are in similar situations of where we are, right? And so when we looked at this year's increases, our increases were actually, in some cases, higher than the Big Five percentage of growth. We were at 6% in math. I think the average in the Big Four outside of that was 3%. So we had good growth rates this year. We're still not at the same level of where we want to be. If you look at Yonkers, Yonkers is particularly high, right? They're around that 42. If you look at New York City, they're around that 42 to 47. I go back to, I know 40% is not great. The assessments are 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is below standards, 2 is partially meeting standards, 3 is meeting standards, 4 is exceeding standards, right? And 2 of the partially meeting standards kind of are in a gray area. So some of the things you could say is, could you look at 2 through 4s? Does that increase? And then you'd have a greater number because you're partially meeting standards. But the number will never be at 100% because
Of course.
that it just
Statistically, it's not possible. The deviation doesn't make sense,
Yes.
and I'm not, far gone like that. So I
no,
completely,
no.
I completely believe and have a sober, understanding of these numbers. So I'm okay with the aggressive. I recognize how aggressive it is, but believe that we need to put ourselves in a position to be aggressive because we haven't been aggressive enough for so long, and so we need to go towards that North Star, and I'm okay with that. And I also believe that we need to maintain the assessment that you have in mind as far as the ELA New York State standards until some other pieces of the system can be looked at. That's the one that's being used, right? So those are my thoughts right now.
Right, thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Commissioner Santiago, any thoughts, any questions?
For me, I think that, with the percentages, I don't think that we have to make a standard for our students. And I think that is best that we push as much as we can to ensure that our standards are high for our students and that we're not allowing, and trying to keep as many students as possible, as proficient in English and math and all the things that they need for life. But also my question is, for the board and also for the administration, what are the plans as far as accountability in these next 4 years? I say that there's 4 years of, that we're trying to reach this goal. What are we going to be doing in between these years to ensure that we're close to that goal? And what are the measures that we're taking to get to that goal also?
So that's where I want to say, this is for 2028, and that's where strategic planning comes in place, but that's where the district handles once the goals are set, the district handles the strategies to get to the goals, right? So once the board approves these goals, you understand as a board that this is where our conscious effort's going to be, right? This is where this is where funding is going to lie, right? When we have budgetary decisions that are going to be tough, right? This is where I'm going to say this has to fall aside because we're going to do this to reach those goals. But the strategy approach could be, like we said, some of the letters training that we're doing, some of the coaching models that we're doing, how we use our intervention supports, right? All of those things become strategies that we outline to meet those interim metrics that we're gonna create to reach those goals. And that's where the strategic planning, that's where this will help us do some more work with Insight to kind of get to those levels.
And so, Commissioner Santiago, we are also having a board retreat on February 1st that we could talk even more about what you are asking about. I'm going to move it over to Commissioner Patterson before we come back down. Commissioner Patterson, any questions or thoughts?
Sure, I have a couple concerns. Starting with the English language arts, it's too broad a group of students. And there's no starting point and ending point. So as far as dates, it should have, for example, in the fall, it should say September of 2024, just an example, through June of 2025. Through the Council of Great City Schools, that's some of the information that I brought back from there when it comes to SMART goals, that it should have a begin date and it should have an end date, because, we're going to be, rating you based on these outcomes between those dates. So they said be quite specific when it comes to, even if it's like a 2 or 3 year span, but it should be specific to include the beginning date and the end date. Also, there's like really 7 goals here, and we should have anywhere from 3, primarily 3 goals with interim goals, but anywhere from 3 to 5. And here I'm seeing 7 if you really break these down. Next, math goals. Again, you need a starting date, ending date, and I don't see that here, a full or complete starting date, ending date. And the increase the percentage of students passing the algebra test, Common Core exam, from 29% to 50% by 2028. We need more specificity regarding who we're talking about here. So that should be added in there. What grades are we talking about, or who are we talking about here? With regard to the high school goals, the first one, increase the number of students earning 5 or more credits in the 9th grade from 70% to 90% by June 2028. That's more of an interim goal, not really a goal itself. And number 2, the percentage of students earning additional distinctions, et cetera, et cetera. We have to define this whole list, even though you have advanced regions, seal of biliteracy, career and civic readiness. Is there anything else that's going to be added to that list? And if so, it should be clearly defined. As far as distinctions, what do you mean by that for me, personally? And last, the percentage of students participating in advanced level courses. I think participating is not a good measure here. The increase of the number of students, not the percentage. So I hope that clearly outlines some of the questions I had when I was reading through this. But for me, I selected 2 goals, the 3rd grade reading and the 8th grade math, as definite goals. But I really could come up with a 3rd. But let's see what other notes did I put here. We need to focus on what's realistic and not new. I put that in there. And target our resources. I think our resources should be really targeted toward maybe the 3rd grade. And don't spread so many of our resources out. I think if we spread our resources out too much, we won't be able to accomplish, the student outcomes and what we set out to do if we're just spread too thin. Let's see. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Just a couple of things I wanted to clarify. By 12, from 12%, from 70% is our current baseline. So that's now what we're starting at. Just curious as to why increase the number of students earning 5 or more credits in 9th grade from 70 to 90% by June of 2028. Could you just walk me through why that would be an interim goal versus a goal? How is that an interim goal, I guess, from what you're looking at? The one that says increase the number of students earning 5 or more credits in ninth grade from 70% to 90% by June of 2028.
I think, when you're talking about earning credits is nice, but does that really tell us what students are learning? So therefore, that's why I thought that might be an interim goal.
All right.
I mean, any student can earn credits, but are they getting a D? Are they getting an F? Are they truly learning if we're counting just credits? So for me, and from what I've researched, the information that I have, which I have right here, for me, that would be an interim goal. And I could be wrong, but that's what I'm reading here.
So, yeah, so I just wanted, you earn a credit by passing a course, right? So I just wanted to make sure that that's it. You can't earn credits. And 5 credits as a ninth grade is a high predictor of student graduation rate. So we want to make sure our kids leave freshman year, their ninth grade year, as a cohort with 5 credits. If they don't, we know that it's not going to be it could be a predictor to the actual graduation rate. The other thing I want to just say is I created, there's 7 goals here. I think, and I'm sorry if I didn't say this, I thought I did, and sometimes I say things in my head and maybe not out loud, that we would come to some 3 to 5. I know the board wants 3 to 5. I just wanted to put some out there to begin that discussion to hone in on our 3 to 5 tonight, right? Or, so that's where I was on this. I didn't want to come in with just 3. I wanted to kind of have these out there for some discussion as a board in terms of what we're deciding.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what we're doing. We're just discussing.
Yeah, so let me just also say, we've got a board retreat on February 1st where the board is going to be discussing this. But let me also point out, I know you said, Commissioner Patterson, what you're going to be great appraising the superintendent on, but it's got to be on the goals that this board agrees to. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about that his appraisal, his performance appraisal is going to be based on what this board collectively decide what the goals are going to be. So, but let me just go back to.
Right, so I want to reply to that. So yes, I have a true and total understanding of that,
Okay.
but we're going to be rating him based on these goals, and setting these goals. That's why setting these goals are so important, because
They're going to be based on what we discussed at the board retreat on February 1st. These are not written in stone as to what we're going to be doing. This board is going to be developing those goals.
and I said I understand that.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure it was clear. Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. I wanted to say too, although it looks like there are 7 goals here, obviously we're going to be paring these down to maybe 3 to 5 goals. If you're looking for feedback, I love the first 2 goals in the packet. Love the 3rd goal in the packet. We'll have discussions about all of this. I really like how the administration changed from the December 12th goals that were given to us. I really like how you took that feedback, and one of the goals that had been proposed to us then was on reducing the number of suspensions, which is incredibly important in this district, but yeah, might be more of a guardrail that we implement in order to get to where we want to be with our students. So I really like that change, that you veered away from that and developed a different goal instead that was more based on academic outcomes, which are measures of what kids know or are able to do. So thank you for that. I really like the goal as well of the increasing credits in 9th grade from 70 to 90%. That is a major predictor of success, and I don't think we've really looked at that in the past as a district. And, we've got kids who are 16, 17, maybe almost 18. Ever be successful at that stage, right? So early intervention, especially at the middle school level, looking at where kids stand when they're entering high school. I think, at East, they do a really good job of tracking that with their freshman academy that they have. But that's something that we need to see district-wide. And so I really do like that there is a goal that's specified. And if we had to choose between all of these goals, I would like to see those based on that measure. What that measure is, we can decide later. but definitely looking at those credits, that's important to me. Thank you.
Excuse
I'm
me,
gonna-
President Elliott. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Griffin is online and would like to interject.
Yeah, let me just, that's what I was going to say, that Commissioner Griffin, we're going to respond to these questions, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I'm going to go with Commissioner Simmons, and then after Commissioner Santiago, I'll come back to you, Commissioner Griffin.
One other thing, President Elliott, excuse me. Your colleagues on Zoom are struggling a little bit to hear you all, so if you could speak into the mic or a little bit
Okay,
louder. Thank you.
I'll keep my comments brief. I hope everyone can hear me right now. Similar to what Commissioner Malloy spoke about, and I think it's would be advantageous of us to just make sure we have that background knowledge and understanding around how strong that first bullet under high school goals really is. When you walk into the 9th grade, getting 5 credits, to Commissioner Malloy's point, is a predictor for you being prepared to graduate and having the credit that you need. So that is strong because, again, historically, we have students that are over age for grade level and then not prepared. In addition to that, we need to have them Regents ready. Since we're still taking Regents exams, they can't just have the course credits. We need to make sure they are also ready to take their Regents, and they're getting all of those pieces as well. So that is a strong one, and I love the second bullet under high school as well. I love all of the stuff right now, but the second bullet is also very strong. And to Commissioner Santiago's point, the meat is really going to be around how this is rolled out, how this is streamlined, and the capacity that the educators get to make sure this is happening, and parents, the whole thing. We've got to make sure that that strategic plan is strong, and if we are able to do this, we will start to see some movement here in this district.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Commissioner Santiago?
Yeah, I'll just say that, also like just talking about this first point on district goals, high school district goals, that 70 to 90%, when we look at the proposed from December 12th, it says that RCSD will increase graduation rates from 67 to 75% by the end of the 2026 to 27 school year. But I think that this goal that we see, the beginning goal, it's more detailed as far as what needs to be done to get to that. And I think that if we can get as detailed as possible when it comes to some of these board goals, I think that'll make it a little bit easier for them to be accomplished.
Thank you, Commissioner Santiago. Commissioner Griffin? Is she online?
Hello, can everyone hear
We
me?
can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I also want to piggyback off of what Amy and Commissioner Simmons and Commissioner Amy Malloy were stating about the changes that were made prior to the previous meeting in December. I do think that that is to be applauded. I just want to know, I did miss some of the conversation. My system was not working as it should be, so I didn't hear everything in the beginning. But I wanted to know, and I don't know if this is applicable, so President Elliott, you just let me know. I see that a lot of the goals we're starting with the 3rd grade level. Do we have information prior to the 3rd grade level, or is there a reason why we don't include that?
I'm going to let Superintendent Peluso respond to that.
Commissioner,
Okay, thank you.
That's a very good question. The first time the students take the New York State assessment is in 3rd grade, right? For comparative sake, what Commissioner Malloy had brought up earlier, are there other metrics that we could use outside of New York State? We could use iReady data for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, absolutely. That's the data that as a district we currently have access to. But we're using 3 through 8 ELA and math data because that's the New York State testing, the New York State testing assessment that is used across New York State to assess how students are performing in terms of a level 1, 2, 3, or 4. I do want to say, go ahead. Do you have another question?
No, I said go ahead. No, I didn't mean to say anything. Go ahead.
No, you're good, because my other point is just a push that I'm going to ask for the board to say, if there's a way that we could agree on goals today, so we could bring them to the January meeting, and if it's a no, it's a no, that would be great, because then in February, we could also begin to look at what are some of the guardrails you want me to operate within, right? Because I think that's That's kind of the next step of this, right, is we talk about if we're going to use some of the framework from the Council of Great City Schools, if these are going to be the goals, and I'm going to start to plan based on these goals, what are some of the parameters you want me to make sure that I'm working within as I go here? I'm assuming you want me to be fiscally responsible as I do this, right? I'm assuming that you're going to want me to make sure that I'm not doing this at the cost of the well-being of our students, right? And this, their social emotional health. So I think there's guardrail conversations that we also have to have. But I want to get to the goals if we can.
So Commissioner
Okay, so
Griffin, do you have any additional questions? I wanted to, before we go into that conversation that the superintendent just espoused, are there any other additional questions that you may have?
yes, I do. I just want to reiterate something. I have a big concern because of the investing in early education or literacy for the children is so important to me, and that if we get that. If we give them that tool early, then we can have better outcomes, student outcomes, as far as the literacy is concerned. So I would like to know if we can see exactly where that data is and where it lies prior to the third grade and them being actually assessed. And how many times are they assessed once they come in? Because my understanding is that what I'm hearing, and I don't know if this is actually true, is that a lot of the teachers are stating that they're getting a lot of assessments. So with those assessments, how many is there in a year, or, for the teachers to give to the students? And again, why can't we have initial data prior to the third grade of seeing where these children are at, so that we can help them be efficient in literacy? Am I missing something?
No, I
I just
think,
want to know. Okay.
nope, I think you're good. I think if you take a look at, if that is where you're thinking, like, that's where I would say in the ELA section that I have here, that second bullet where it says all students reading by third grade, that tells me, if that's a board goal from 18% to 40% or 18% to 15% to 50%, I'm looking at two different screens here, 15% to 50%, I am going to resource heavy in our
Okay.
K1, 2,
Okay.
and third grade to support that reading by third grade, right? Because that's a goal, right? That's an identified target for us. So
Right.
that's where I'm saying, and we have diagnostic assessments through iReady that we do periodically throughout the year to see how kids are performing. We're going to need to interim assess progress. That's my
Okay.
role as superintendent, to get us to the established goal that the board is setting. Let me
Okay.
let the board and us, after discussion, identify the goals, and then let the team and the administration plan to achieve that goal, right? And I think that's where, this is healthy for us to have this discussion, so that we don't get into what program are we using to do this? What does this look like? We should be sharing data, interims out, yearly. Here's how our
Right.
kids are performing. This is how we think we're going to do to meet that goal. But how we do it is the admin's conversation and the admin team's work to get there.
You have another question,
And
Commissioner?
my last thing, and the last thing I wanted to say is, are we certain that the iReady program is the best program for our students in the city of Rochester? I mean, I've been reading about the different programs of the curriculum of the reading, and I kind of waver with the percentage that iReady has as a positive measure for the reading or as a curriculum in any district. But that is my last comment.
Yep, and I will respond once again. Like, this district, we've used numerous things. We've used NWA in the past. We've used iReady as diagnostic assessments. We've used various diagnostic assessments. What I believe the board wants to hold me to is a goal. And if my
Right.
teaching and learning team and my team here believes, from the ELA directors to the deputy superintendent teaching and learning to the chief academic officer, that iReady is going to get us to that goal with the learning program or whatever the curriculum may be, that's the team's do. Hold me to the goal. Don't hold me to how I get to the goal. As long as I'm working within your guardrails that we have to establish next, I'm going to work to get us to the goal. I just need to know what goal I'm shooting for.
All right, thank you, Commissioner
Thank
Griffin.
you.
Vice
Thank
President,
you. Thank you, guys.
sure. Vice President LeBron?
Yeah, I just want to ask how the Kathy Hochul, our governor, she just dropped that back to basics on reading and the changes that are going to be implemented in the state of New York. I personally have to state too that the metrics used is a constant shift from the state. I have said this before. When you're constantly changing where the goal ends on the state level is, I have no idea how any district can actually ever meet these metrics, right? Because it's constantly shifting and it's shifting again. So if you're not aware, the governor she did a presser, but she is going to be introducing legislation to the state legislators, and it will pass because they did a press conference on it, and she's not going to do a presser if she doesn't have the votes. Um, and I know that there's going to be money to train teachers, and I'm hoping we are also slated to get a pot of that money to train our teachers and getting them back to the basics, which is phonics. Um, so just curious about how we're doing this goal with the set of standards that are currently at the state about to shift. I do think because this is a multi-year goal, that we are going to have to come right back to these goals before 2028 to adapt and shift them with the
Right,
new
yeah.
state regulations and the new standards that are going to be rolled out. Um, I don't have the timeline. I try to go on the presser to see if they put out a timeline. They did not. They just said there's going to be rolled out. It's going to be voted on in the next couple of months with the state. So just trying to understand, like, how does this align with our own goals of trying to meet a goal on a metric that is about to shift from the state level yet again?
Yeah, and I hear that. It'll constantly, we could be faced with the constantly changing goalpost, right, and a constantly changing goal line. I do believe, just based on federal accountability, there's going to be a measure of student performance at some level because it has to be to get federal funding. Now, I think what the governor's talking about is, what type of literacy instruction, curriculum we're doing in our schools. I don't believe there'll be, and it may change the assessments, and we may have to come back and say, here's a shift in how the assessment's done, here's the shift of what the data is, and I'm going to have to defend any sort of modification that I want to make to this goal with some data and reasoning as to why I would need that. But I agree, when we're dealing with state assessments, when we're dealing with graduation metrics, right now, we know that there's a new, the Blue Ribbon Commission is going to potentially change how graduation looks. All of those things may need to be adjusted at some point in time, yes.
And I just remember, Vice President, I don't know if you were around during the time when the district was in fact going in the right direction with the scores, and then they changed it, is the cut score that they changed, so it took us back. Commissioner Simmons?
Yeah, and the reality is, this is organizationally, the school district, it doesn't matter what it is, that you can have a well-laid plan and some goals, but we know that they are never written in stone, and it is frustrating, but it is, you have to have a strategic plan that is livable and breathable, and you have to be able to pivot. And if we are moving in the right direction, we'll be moving in the right direction, and we will get close to, if not meeting or exceeding goals eventually. That's what I believe when you have a well-laid plan. I was reading the report around Governor Hochul, and we just had a great conversation in our pre-ESA meeting, so stay tuned around that. Definitely, if people want to know about assessments, there's been a lot of legwork. I've personally driven up to places like Troy, New York, sat in all kinds of literacy discussions trying to find out, are we using the right assessment and tools? And so, we have to let the experts be the experts, and we ask those questions, but I'm confident that we are moving in the right direction. So the research is there, Governor Hochul's thing is there, somebody mentioned the Blue Ribbon Plan. Right now, we just need to get these goals together, and, as we have to pivot, that's what we'll have to do, because we're stuck with the state, until the state stabilizes.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Any other questions before we move on to the next agenda item? All right. Well, thank
President
you.
Elliott, Commissioner
Yes.
Griffin would like to say something.
Commissioner Griffin?
Hi, you guys. I'm sorry. I put an emoji. I don't know if you've seen it. It was an error. But I just wanted to piggyback off of what actually Vice President LeBron said and about the thing about Kathy Hochul, and what Superintendent Peluso said. Um, is it a way that we can possibly delay it to see when that date is to come out so that we don't have to change the goals so fast? Would it be do you think it would possibly be a waste of time to do that now and then have to change it like a week or two later? Because it seems like she's rolling this out pretty swiftly, expeditiously. So to Vice President Beatrice LeBron's point, why do it now if we have to go back and do it again? I'm just asking.
Yeah, we're operating currently without goals and directions, right? We're heading towards a budget season coming up where, we need to we're creating a strategic plan. Once again, the reading initiative and science of reading and a lot of the work that is happening there, I think, and Commissioner Simmons just alluded to it, I believe there's a space for us to really get to doing some learning at maybe an ESA, if the commissioner would be so willing to kind of talk about how do you assess reading, how do you measure reading, what does this look like, and maybe bring that to an ESA in the coming months. But I do believe we have to have clear established goals, and then we could come back to the table and tweak them moving forward.
All right, thank you. So we want to, Commissioner Santiago?
This is just a personal question. These goals will be amendable, right?
They will have to be, yeah.
I couldn't hear him.
So,
I'm sorry, what did you
yep, Commissioner Santiago just asked if we would be able to amend these goals in years to come, and if there's some changes, absolutely. But it does give us a course of action moving forward. And, I just, for my sense, if you could provide me with feedback on each of these goals, and then I could then bring that forth on my superintendent's report in January to say, these are the goals that garnered the most support, and I will show what got the most support, and then we could then make a decision on if we could approve those at that point in time, if everyone's comfortable with that, because I think that's in February, I want to hit a guardrail discussion.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Griffin. Vice President LeBron?
Yeah, just one more point to the goals. When we start talking about the guardrails, that we are going to tie them in to the board budget priorities. And so that's going to be tied back to our budget. So I know that right now we still sort of have to make a final vote on the final board goals. And I just want to clarify too, I wasn't saying we don't have any goals, because I also requested we tie them into the budget for the first time, and that we don't have two separate processes that are not linked and don't make sense. So if I guess this is a request to the administration, if you could start thinking like what a 1 year, 2 year, whatever the goals we land on, if you can start looking at from a budgetary standpoint, what you believe, to accomplish goal one is going to cost, and sort of lay that out separately from the budget. I think that's the approach I'll take this year with the budget anyway, is because we're not doing a budget board priority memo, none of that stuff, right? All of these are going to be married, tied together, that then the conversation in lieu of the board budget goals or priorities becomes, here's the budget, the goals that we've established and the monetary amount it's going to take to accomplish them year 1, year 2, year 3. Even though we don't have year 2 and year 3 budget, those budgets are future budgets. Still good for all of us now to know what that monetarily is going to look like to take to get us there, so we can start planning ahead, especially this critical year as ARPA dollars are going away.
Thank you, Vice President Brown. Just like you've said numerous times, and we've said, is the funds won't be there, right? Right now in terms of on top amounts of money. This just helps me when we have to make some tough decisions about how money's going to be spent to say, this is where the board wants the funding to be, this is where we're going to put it in. That's why those guardrail conversations are really important, because I don't want to even put anything out as a hypothetical, because that, becomes, people's thinking, but we can't cut from X, Y, or Z because the board has said you can't do that to get to this goal, right? And that's why I want to get to those guardrail conversations, so that once we have these done, and I know that I have to invest in here without additional money, where are we going to shift some things to make these goals a reality in year 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 5, as well as honor what is put into place as not being able to be sacrificed at the cost of this. If I'm kind of capturing that in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, Commissioner Malloy?
As we look at the guardrails that we're going to be implementing or putting into place, I want to make sure and just put this on record that we're looking at specific guardrails related to our special education population, our English language learners, and then also specific guardrails. And these are tied in with the budget prioritization, as Vice President LeBron said, but also social emotional goals as well, or guardrails, to ensure that we're not depleting funding from that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. I'm going to go to our state monitor.
Thank you, President Elliott. I would like to begin by commending the superintendent and the team. I mean, there have been many discussions talking about high expectations. They look like very high achievable goals, but these goals are going to help the district about moving forward, about moving in the right direction as a district in good standing, reducing the number of schools or eliminating the number of schools on receivership, and moving the district forward. You're talking about the assessment at the primary level. If you're not making progress at the 3 to 8, you're gonna have to go back, because if you see that the I-ready information is showing that all the students are performing high, and when they take the state exam, they are not, then you're going to have to go back and assess why there's that discrepancy, why the I-ready is not aligned with the information that you are getting from the state. So these are high level, but this is the direction that the district needs to go.
Thank you, Mr. Eliseo. Commissioner Patterson, and then I'm going to, after Commissioner Patterson, just sort of allow the superintendent, because the superintendent asked us something in the beginning, and we need to come back and have that conversation. Commissioner Patterson?
So I guess this is for clarification purposes, and my understanding is, and I could be wrong, so in reading the goals here, that once we set the goals, and correct me if I'm wrong, the goals are set. It's, if we have to make a correction, we use the interim goal to make the correction. Am I incorrect in that information, or once the goals are set for that 3-year period, whatever it is, that?
You monitor the goals every year. Did you achieve that? Are you going to get to that 40%? Are you going to get to that 90%? And if you're not, then you have to go back and revisit those goals.
All right, so the goals, from what you understand, are changeable. We can adopt or adapt.
You have to go back and see what other support you have to put in place so you can achieve those goals.
Right, but are they, and again, I'm not being difficult. I hope you don't think I'm being difficult. Actually, I'm learning. So, do we do that by setting and changing the interim goals or guardrails, or
You're going to look at the guardrails
inputs
to support that goals, because if you go back and say, okay, we didn't get to 90%, it is okay to be at 80, no. You're going to go back and see what works, look at those guardrails, and put those systems in place so you can achieve your goals.
I want to also build on that to say that I'm going to assume, I won't make, that once goals are approved, that you're going to ask me at some point to publicly present on how we're doing towards achieving those goals. And I will do that. And if I, at that point in time, say that I don't look like I'm going to hit 90% because I gave, let's go back. We have, a pandemic. We have something. We have some big thing that's causing it. I could then ask the board to amend a goal, right? And the board could then so choose to do that. But essentially what it is every year, I'm going to assume that you're going to ask me how we're doing on progress toward these goals through evaluation, through public presentation. And then from there, if there's a case in time in June of 2027 and we're at 80% and I say we're not going to make 90%, you could say, oh, get to 90%, or listen, what do you think is fair? We could have those conversations as a dialogue, but it gives me a place to put resources and start to achieve too. But these goals are board goals, the board conversations, absolutely amendable by what the 7 of you decide to do.
So thank you. I'm going to allow the superintendent to come back in because he's asking us to look at these goals and give him some direction in terms of where we need to be going, and then the conversation that we need to be having around these in the board retreat. So if we can just go back through those goals, there's 7 of them is what's listed there? Is that what I understand?
So I think there's 2, 4, I think there's 5 overall bullets here.
Okay.
Where we have, sorry, 2, 4, 7 overall bullets, my apologies.
Right.
What, you know, if the board how they want to provide me with feedback, I want to bring forth those goals to January 25th meeting. So on January 25th, we got the 3 to 5 board goals set, squared away, and we could then start to have a conversation on guardrails, right? And this will also elevate our strategic planning process as well, right? Because we also have been waiting for board goals to do that. And, you know, I want to say that, you know, it's also part of the state monitor's plan. You know, if I didn't think it was worthwhile, even if it was in the plan, I would say that, but I believe that this is important work for us to do regardless if it's in the state monitor's plan or not. It's something that we need to do now.
So we have, the superintendent's presented us with 7 goals. And so let me just start with Commissioner Griffin. And Commissioner Griffin, what we're doing now is we are reducing what the superintendent has just presented to us in terms of the goals that we believe that we want the superintendent to present to us in the January 25th board meeting. So have you had an opportunity to review the 7, and can you give us, you know, about 3 to 5 goals that you think that this district should be focusing in on? You want me to come back to you, or?
Yeah, because I really think that I wouldn't want to rush.
Okay.
I really would need more time to really review because goals are important. And I wouldn't want to give you something with haphazard. I really want to be able to give something that's obtainable, not just for the superintendent, but for us as a whole, as a committee. So I think that we definitely would need time to hone in on what those goals are. Goals are very important to the students and to all of us. So I would like a little bit more time to review that. I know you want it today, but
Okay.
I think it's important for us to really be focused on what is needed for the children and for the board to be successful.
And Commissioner, that's fair point, understood. So what I will ask is that I'm going to, you know, you all have the goals, that you provide me with your 3 to 5 that are important to you. I will bring that back forth on the 25th to share where the board feedback got us, and then hopefully at that point in time, we could square it away. So in my board letter my confidential letter that I send today, I will put a date in for hopefully a week from tomorrow. It'll give everyone a week to kind of read these, look at these, chew on these, and provide me with your feedback. So by the 25th, I could come to the meeting and say, this is the feedback I received from all the commissioners. This is the feedback that, this is where it landed. Can we live with this and approve it?
Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. Commissioner Malloy?
Welcome.
Yeah, I'm actually prepared just to, you know, looking through the 7 that you've presented, there are 4 that really stand out to me as being most realistic. I think the first 2 bullets that we see, that proficiency, actually the first 3 bullets, okay? increasing the percentage of students in grades 3 through 8 who are proficient on the New York State math assessment from 14 to 40. That's the third one. And then the first two on the first page, the first one on the second page. And then I would only want us to have maybe a total of 4 goals, in my opinion. I think which one? I also think that increasing the number of students earning 5 or more credits in 9th grade from 70 to 90 would be my 4th one.
All right, yeah. Commission, let me just go up to Vice President LeBron.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to add that we literally would, I just want clarity, and I'm sorry, y'all, because my head is groggy today. I'm sick. I've been sick all week. But we have 21 days because we do need to vote on it because we're marrying them with the budget keys. So we got 21 days to give feedback. And I know the superintendent keeps saying to him, but the reality is it should be going to the board clerk so that she can gather, organize all of the information. In the past, that's how we essentially have done it. We can't be sharing it with each other via email. We would be breaking the law, just as a reminder. So it would have to go to Rahima if we don't have any answers tonight. But I will give feedback on the ones that I want to support if you want that tonight. I'm not sure. I don't even know what we're doing. We got 21 days to finalize this and vote, but
Give your
budget
feedback,
season has
B.
started.
So
Give your
Huh?
feedback.
if you want to give it to me now, give it to me now.
Yeah. If not,
All right, let me.
yeah, if not, Vice President, we will have about a week or so. And then, to take your time to determine
Well,
which
that's
three to
Well,
five
what I want to
goals.
understand is the timeline of when Carmine wants feedback back by. So if you're giving folks time, we need to have a timeline even for that. To leave it open-ended and say, take your time. The reality is it's 21 days.
No, I'm
That-
sorry. So I had mentioned in my Friday letter, I would put it in for a week from Friday. I would outline the goals, make sure everyone was familiar with what we discussed. Here's
A week from
by
last
next,
Friday
by,
or-
by tomorrow, a week from tomorrow.
Okay.
That would give me time to, or if you want to send it to Rahima, Rahima, the board clerk and I will work the process out.
Work together, yeah.
And then on the 25th, we have to be prepared to vote. And that's, either way, we walk out of here today to vote on the 25th, or we wait until I gather your feedback and we come together on the 25th and we vote on the 25th. But on the 25th, we need to vote on these goals.
I agree with you on that, Superintendent. I want to be clear. We also need to, because budget season is already here. So.
President Elliott, if I could interject for a moment and offer an alternative date. After it comes out in your Friday letter, we then have a special meeting on the 16th, which is kind of in between those 2 dates, where there could be some more public discussion based on what you all provide Dr. Peluso, and if there needs to be some more conversation ahead of the vote on the 25th.
Yeah, we'll determine if that, we need to have more conversation on that. I will yield to the board on your thinking around maybe doing it at a special meeting. So we can send out an email with regard to that. Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you. So my recommendations based on this information for board goals would be on the English language arts, the first bullet, actually the first and second bullet are what I would like. On the math goals, the first bullet is what I would like. And under high school goals, those first 2 I'm interested in. If we end up with 4, that's fine, because we do need something that's digestible, but those first 2 are good. I think I'm married to the 9th grade, the 5 credits, if I had to choose.
Thank you.
Commissioner Santiago?
The English language arts, both points from there. The first point under math goals, and the first point at the high school goals. And
Yeah, we're talking, I hear people saying 4 goals, but if you've got a 5th one, also offer that too,
yeah,
Commissioner.
so I also did like the second point on the math goal also, on the math goals.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Patterson?
For me personally, I just don't like the verbiage, the way it's written. And I think that the suggestion is anywhere from 3 to 5 goals. My suggestion would be 3 goals because it's more attainable. If you try to reach 5 or 6 or 7 goals here, I think it's going to be very difficult for anyone, to attain those, results. So for me, I would say minimal is better for me if I'm a superintendent. Again, I've never been in your position, but minimal for me, you have a better opportunity to reach those goals. So that's my suggestion. I'm really concerned, like I said, I think we're doing fine as far as the statistics in second grade. I think it's somewhere where we get to third grade, and I look at these statistics here where we start to drop off. So again, for me, and again, maybe I'm out of my wheelhouse, but I'm going to put most of my energy into third grade because this is where I'm seeing from third, fourth, all the way up to eighth, that bar continues to climb as far as us not being, reading on grade level and math. So I'm going to stop there.
Do you have?
One more thing, excuse me. And again, what I like to see is a beginning date and an end date, so spring of, I'm just using an example, 2024 until June of 2025, for example. And I think that's it. So I'm not totally sure. I like the first one, obviously, but I would like to see more specifics relative to the third grade and really putting a lot of our efforts and our energies into teaching our kids how to read, because if they don't know how to read, they can't comprehend. And if they can't read, they can't do math. They can't do any other subject area. So I'll leave it at that.
Now, that's just one. And I know you talked about 3. Do you have 2 more that you would like to
At this point in time, no.
Okay, thank you. So I will also, particularly because since we have to, we have requirements from the state, so the English language, art, and arts, the first one, as well as I think that we need to have our students to be reading by third grade. And I would also like for us to, when we're looking at high school goals, increase the numbers of students earning 5 or more credits. So for the time being, and I'll just increase the percentage of students participating in advanced level courses. And so I will do those 4. Well, I'll do the increased percentage of students earning additional distinction. So that's 5, but if we we determine that we need to work down to 3, we can also do that as well, so. All right. Well, thank you all very much for this conversation, rich conversation around this, with more conversation around this to come. And so we'll move on now to presentations with regard to the EPO. And we're in the process of our contract, which ends in 2025, where the board has to make the determination if we're going to continue with the EPO or we're not going to continue with the EPO. I recall when I was here back in, this conversation started around 2012, where we had a high school that was seriously underperforming. And so the state had challenged us around, doing an EPO, or there are some other alternatives as well, but there was to be a takeover. And so under the leadership of the former President Van White, he had conversations with the University of Rochester, and we are where we are with the EPO because of the leadership and work with the University of Rochester. It has been a good partnership, but I think that we have to have the discussion now whether or not we either have it to be retained by the EPO or that we bring the school back into the district. And so I've asked President, Superintendent Peluso, as well as Superintendent Blocker, to present to us their positions around whether we should continue with the EPO with the EPO, which is the University of Rochester, or should we bring the district in. There are a number of considerations, whether we retain it, whether we bring it in, or whether it is retained by the University of Rochester. So I'm going to open it up with it before we start. Any questions about what I've just said? Okay, so I will start it with Superintendent Blocker about her presentation around the EPO. It's been good work that's been done, so I want to make sure that we acknowledge that. But there are some concerns that some of us have, around the financial piece and some other things. And so I think it's time now for us to have this discussion because, as I said, the contract ends in 2025. Superintendent Blocker?
Thank you, President Elliott. I have 5 or 6 slides I just want to present on, and then beneath those are data slides and additional information that anyone that hasn't been at a previous East presentation may want to look and delve deeper into. But I want to publicly state that I think it's critical for the EPO to continue. While the transformation at East over the past 8 years has been a success, there remains much work to do collaboratively with the district. In order for growth to be both sustained and bounteous beyond just preservation, a deep understanding of what is in place must be thoughtfully analyzed and assessed routinely. And I believe in order to truly understand what's happened at East, someone must be able to articulate the tangibles, which are some of the big pieces, as well as the multitude of the intangibles that lie beneath each of those. So for example, some of the big tangibles people may say are, well, they have extended day, or they have a literacy block, or they have a teacher leader model. It's great for you to just say that, but if you don't understand all of the things that are beneath those and how they're interwoven, then you have missed what the value is of the whole picture. So for example, somebody may say, to save money, let's remove extended day. But if you remove extended day, then you also remove family group. And if you don't know what family group is, it's one of our key SEL structures where we do relationship building. And if you remove family group, then you remove cohort town halls, which happen every Wednesday, where we have scholar unity and scholar voice and scholar recognition and honors that take place. And then if you remove the cohort town hall, then you remove one of the great values of the cohort tracker, where kids understand what are the graduation requirements, what their progress is toward meeting those requirements, how closely we're monitoring their growth, how much support we're trying to provide based on what the cohort tracker indicates. And so I've listed there a bunch of the tangibles, a bunch of the intangibles, the systems, the culture, the best practices, the cultivated leadership and expectations that exist. And then I've talked about the fact that 10 years ago we created an actual plan, and then with that actual plan, we did deliberate matching of resources, of efforts, of initiatives, with identified and prioritized needs specific to our context. We've built systems that support effective implementation, ongoing monitoring, and continuous improvement. And for East, we've been able to focus solely on East, which is different than the superintendent. But by focusing solely on East, we've been able to make intentional and calculated decisions in everything that we've done that has yielded results. Some of those have taken many years to establish. And so as the board, I just ask that you make certain that you understand all of the tangibles and the intangibles when you make a decision, because by ignoring the intangibles or having wanton disregard for them, you will miss the minuscule parts that have exponential impact on outcomes. The question comes up, what are the reservations for returning to the RCSD? And there really are four that come up all of the time. The first is that few and far between are individuals from the RCSD who have ever taken the time to see and understand what has been done at East. Commissioner Malloy had a daughter at East, so she is probably most informed of the things that we have done. But there has not been other representation at the district level that has come in to say, what are you doing? Why is it working? What didn't work that made you pivot to try a different route? So it's very hard for us to respect the request to return when we feel like no one has even taken the time to understand what has been done. The second thing is that very early on, and not Dr. Peluso, I feel like Dr. Peluso and I have had a wonderful relationship and understand the value and the need to work collaboratively. But early on, there was a dynamic set up that became East versus the RCSD. But in reality, that was a myth that someone was putting out. We felt it was East versus East. What can we do to continuously get better every day at East? Not can we beat Soda, not can we beat Monroe, can we beat 58. That wasn't our goal. And that acrimonious discourse is what isolated East from the district. So we never wanted to exist in a silo. We wanted East to be able to share what we had learned if we were successful, which we have shown some success over time. And then we wanted it to be replicated in other places. So it wasn't just East scholars that were benefiting from the EPO, it was RCSD scholars. As I already alluded to, all of the elements are interwoven. To remove one here or there without understanding the impact would be detrimental. And then the last major reservation is in the past, we have experienced, and all of you know, great turbulence in the RCSD, great turnover in leadership in the RCSD, many different initiatives that come and go. So the stability that we've been able to create at East amongst our administrative team, our teachers, the curriculum we're using, the hiring, the work conditions, the professional development, our budget, our extended day, our community school model, it's enabled us in our small little cocoon to cohesively align everything we're doing. And it's insulated us from the district turbulence. I feel like the district is definitely on the right path right now to creating a much smoother route, and that's why I have truly enjoyed working with Dr. Peluso. But the potential to lose the autonomy that we've had is both daunting and frightening. And removing previous systemic barriers has allowed us to thrive at East. Those same systemic barriers that have adversely impacted RCSD kids for decades. As far as the U of R goes, the U of R has been a catalyst to build the capacity for change in response to a community need. This was the transformation of a persistently failing and dangerous school, as designated by NICED. The RCSD tried several state and federal initiatives to turn East around, small learning communities, professional learning communities, incentive pay, before the EPO structure was adopted by the Board of Education. East has utilized the EPO supports extensively, and those structures and systems have both been implemented, ingrained, and sustained over time. So to go back to the district without a deep understanding of what those systems and structures have been that have become ingrained, and to acknowledge the distance we've now gotten from RCSD initiatives is very concerning. The U of R spent much time curating research on what is successful school transformation. The Center for Urban Success has documented some of the work that they've done. The Educated Elevator has documented the work, and I've put the resources in there. But the U of R and East have frequently offered to collaborate with the RCSD and the greater Rochester community by connecting theory and practice through research, community conversations, and practitioner briefs. I can't say how often things have been attended by any RCSD people for the sharing of that knowledge that we've learned to take place. So I would push back to the board and say, how can we leverage the U of R holistically and our shared learning of what a successful school transformation looks like, and just as importantly, coupled with future identified needs of the children of the RCSD to lift our entire community. Not what can the U of R continue to do just for East, what can the U of R do for the RCSD? Not what studies can we do on our kids, what studies do we need the U of R to do that will help our systems and structures to educate kids? And then the last piece that I just want to refer to are what have been the elephants in the room so many times. The first statement that we don't take L's. If you look at the data that's been provided there, back in 14-15, we had 24.8% of L's. Today, right this moment, we have 22.5%. So you're really talking about a 1.7% difference. It's important to note, though, that the graduation rate for those L's has gone from 16% to 68%. So my pushback on that myth that is often said is housing L's not the same as graduating L's. And I don't want us to be confused. Just because a school is full of a population, if that population isn't being successful at all, then we haven't done our job. And so I would place our bilingual program and the success they have had and the supports they have in place for our scholars against any other program in the nation. We have readily opened our arms to the large amount of Hispanic scholars that have come from different Spanish-speaking places to make them feel like they have a home, not that they are an add-on. The second point that comes up all the time is East removed all the scholars with IEPs. And that's not true. We didn't remove the kids. We phased out the self-contained programs that were educational death sentences for Black and brown children, graduating at 0% to 5% for self-contained classes. We welcomed 4 NYSA classes to our building. How many NYSA classes are at some of the other schools that are constantly touted as successful? How many NYSA classes are at SODA? How many NYSA classes are at 58? So it's not a question of have we put out students with IEPs. We've changed their IEPs when families have granted it to work in a model that we believe is critical for success, which is not self-contained 812 kids or self-contained 612 kids. It's to get kids into a setting where they have integrated teaching support on a routine basis. We've changed our IEP graduation rate, scholars with IEPs, from 26% to 74%. So I'll go back to the question again. We may have 2 or 3% less of those kids, but we're graduating them at 3 times the amount. Is the goal simply to house, or is it for those kids to be nurtured, embraced, and successful? We drastically reduced enrollment. Many people look at the previous enrollment and don't understand that it was a 7 through 12 building. Now we're 2 separate buildings. If you don't add the 2 numbers together, you are going to feel like we have drastically reduced, but we haven't drastically reduced. One of the things I want to point out is that we have cleaned the books to reflect who was actually attending at East versus who was previously garnering TAPU support at East, which was many, 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 many kids. We now have accurate and verified enrollment. You don't come to East and find 200 kids that nobody knows about by name or face. We know our children, we have them on the books, and our job is to educate them as individuals. It's very confusing when the plan was laid out, what to do with special ed students to remove self-contained, what was to do with cohort numbers, which was to reduce it to 180. All of those things were in the original plan that was adopted, but it feels like we get criticism for what was adopted and for following through on exactly what we said we would do. Our goal was 180 in each cohort. We got the building to a point where we felt like we were functioning and moving in the right direction. The last few years, we've moved that up to 200 scholars in each cohort. Is that something we want to increase down the road more in collaboration with the RCSD? Certainly, I think it's something we should talk about. But it wasn't a haphazard decision. It was an intentional decision that we were going to start small, get control back of a pervasively dangerous and unsuccessful school, and then grow back up, not continue to be at a level where we had no success. As Dr. Peluso has alluded, and I've said, East is a part of the RCSD. The RCSD is East. It is so hurtful when people continue to say they're two separate things. They're two separate things because that is how it was pushed when the inception took place 10 years ago. So I just want to, without going into other details, say that I believe every scholar is all of our scholars. It's not East scholars and RCSD. We're in this together, and if we don't learn from one another and support one another, then there's been a loss for all of our kids. And then the last part, which is something I'm just really passionate about, the comment that East is too expensive. And I say failure was expensive also, especially when we had a 33% graduation rate. And some people think East in the EPO was looking for equality, that they would get what everyone else got. That is not what we were ever looking for. And we weren't looking for equity either, that everyone got what they needed. We were looking and still are looking for justice. And justice only happens when the causes of inequity are addressed and the systemic barriers are removed. I think we're getting closer at East for the kids to get the educational experience they deserve, whether they're in Pittsford or any other place. Our kids deserve the same thing as everybody else. Instead of arguing, should we stop what they're getting, I feel like we should be advocating for what is it that every RCSD scholar needs, and how can they have the same things to have justice for each and every one of them. A large bulk of the funding pays for the salaries for the additional hour in the day for all staff and for the year-round professional learning model that we use. So if delivering primary instructional minutes and expecting all to possess a continued growth mindset are standard staples of what we do at East, why would we want to change any of that when we've experienced the success? So on the next pages are just the data, and I've shared it two ways. I've shared it over the 8-year period so you could see the incremental progress, and then I've shared it from the first year to the last year so you could just have a snapshot. And then I moved into the benefits of the EPO, and I sent this to Ms. Wynn to have her send it to you guys so you can click on each of these links to understand what are the academic programs at East? What are the career pathways? What do we do with guaranteed and viable curriculum? What are our best practices? What does professional learning really look like at East? What are the athletics and extracurricular things? What leads our leadership, engagement, and voice for our kids and our staff? And I would ask, if you look and delve deeply into all of these things, that you say to yourself, what are the things we would want perhaps to end because we didn't know how they were interwoven together? If you go further in, it tells you the multitude of connections we have with the University of Rochester. I couldn't even begin to tell you the number of different things we do with them. And it doesn't mean those things would have to end if the EPO partnership ended. That's not my point at all. My point is that they have poured into us and allowed our kids to grow and advance, and that to assume that some of those things have not been positive or fruitful for our kids is to not understand the whole picture, along with all of our collaborative partners. In closing, I would just like to say to the board, I fully understand the RCSD should operate as one unified district. One unified district with unique individualized schools solely under the leadership of one superintendent. I am completely committed to support that transition. Dr. Peluso and I started that conversation the very first time that we met. Once the time and work has been extended to honor and understand what we have done at East, that's when I want to fully commit to that. And once the community voice has had a chance to weigh in on this change. My allegiance right now is solely to the scholars for their continued progress. When the RCSD is stabilized, they've rebounded from the school closings coming up, they've successfully transitioned to the new middle school structure, then I think we should focus on fully integrating East back into the RCSD. Right now, I think our goal should be, how can we once again work collaboratively so when East is handed back over to the RCSD, it's on solid footing and embraced for the uniqueness that it currently has. I look very forward to working with Superintendent Peluso and truly believe that he can continue to carry the work forward. But until the time has been taken to understand what we've done for 8.5 years, we're not there at this moment in time. Thank you, President Elliott.
Thank you, Superintendent Blocker. One of the things I want to do first before Superintendent Peluso presents is if there are any clarifying questions. We're not going to get into the depth of it, but if there's something that Superintendent Blocker said that you have just a question about, I wanted to give the board an opportunity just to ask, some clarifying questions before we move on to Dr. Peluso, and then we can get into the discussion. Any clarifying questions that Commissioner Santiago?
So if the partnership is continued, how long? What do you think is the timeline, between if today the conversation, or not today, but if the decision is that this relationship continues between the district and the EPO, how long would that continue?
My hope would be that it would continue for at least 2 to 3 more years after the district gets through what I consider will be some turbulence and upheaval next year with all the changes that are taking place. But what's critical, Commissioner Santiago, during those years, we have to be working together the entire time, so it's a seamless handoff. Right now, there is no seamlessness between us at all. So I'm not asking for it to extend. I never thought it would go 10 years, but I can tell you right now, we're not in a position to turn it back over and feel confident with where it's headed. Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions for Superintendent Blocker? All right.
Yes. Ms. Blocker, I have to say that your presentation was awesome. Very detailed. I hear your passion, and I applaud you for all of that. You did address, and we know that the U of R has a lot to do with East High School. I just wanted to clarify, is there any information noted of any other schools they were willing to participate and assist with? Or is that's the information that you don't have? You did note that they were looking to, assist in the RCSD. Was there any information noted of any schools in particular? Because we do have schools that are in need, and we know that East High School was at one time a very violent school, as though we have Franklin as well. So when you mentioned that, that was interesting to me. Is there any way that you have that information available to us? But again, your presentation was awesome, and I appreciate what you presented today.
Yes, the U of R does partner with other RCSD schools, specifically with the healthcare situation with our health centers. And Dr. Peluso has done the telemed with RCSD schools. What else the U of R does is train many of our teachers and our administrators. And so it's that seamless pipeline that we're creating, that people that are coming from the U of R and that are doing internships in our school and then student teaching in our school have an opportunity to learn best practices that have existed already at East High School. The U of R has willingly offered all of our conferences that we've done, opportunities for any school, and we've had many suburban schools that have come to those opportunities to learn and grow, but we haven't had much support within the RCSD. So I think the goal would be to figure out with the U of R, what are the multitude of ways they could collectively and holistically support the RCSD while simultaneously finishing our partnership and figuring out a way to carry it on once East is part of the RCSD.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Blocker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. We will have the superintendent to present about why we should look at considering bringing it back into the district. Superintendent Peluso?
Good evening. Whew, a lot of talking today. So if you're here for the Holyfield-Tyson fight between East and the district, you're at the wrong place. Okay, because that's not what I'm here to do. I recognize the work that East has done. I recognize at a time we were out of place. And I went back to December of 2014 where I found the presentation from the East EPO. I almost wish there was video so I could know what went with those slides and hear the words that went with those slides, because I don't want to make some assumptions. But 10 years ago, they talked about making sure that you had the right people, that East had the right people, that they were using best practices, and that we were building capacity. What I want to say today is that I believe East has done that. And I understand East feels in a way that the district hasn't fully accepted their practices and their beliefs. And that is not coming from my world. We have schools that are very successful. School of the Arts, Rochester Early College. We have other schools that are doing things differently than what East is doing. It doesn't mean that they're doing those wrong. And it doesn't mean that East is doing what they do wrong. Right? It is working for East, it works for School of the Arts, it works for World of Inquiry, it works for Rochester Early College. There is no, and sometimes one particular model that works best for all. For me, what I want to talk about today is why we're here right now. And why we're here right now is, one, there's a recommendation in the financial and academic plan that says by December 31st, 2023, the district administration shall present to the state monitor and financial consultant in a format approved by the state monitor a final draft of the comprehensive plan for the return and integration of East Lower Middle School and East Upper High School to the RCSD. So that is one of the recommendations. The EPO contract expires in July of 2025. So a year from the end of this year, we have an expired contract. And if we're going to truly honor the work that Superintendent Blocker just talked about, then we need to begin planning now. I can't wait until October or November of next year when we say we're not entering a contract with East, begin to plan and negotiate and continue the work of East in that short turnaround time. It's not fair to our families, it's not fair to our staff, it's not fair to the East community. So I need time to begin to have those conversations to say some of those practices that Superintendent Blocker talked about, extended pay, schedule, teacher selection, teacher transfer, we have to create a system in order for that to work as a whole district. The other part of this is in those recommendations, there were additional supports. I'm not going to argue about those additional supports. I'm not going to argue about the cost. I will say that for me, as a superintendent, we're making goals for the district. When I log into my New York State reporting system, East is in there as the district's data, right? Because they're the district. But my voice as superintendent is minimized because I have to ask permission at times. So when we go to budget situations and I have to make budget decisions, there's a negotiation that I have to go to the East superintendent and have conversations on what they're willing to give up and what they're willing to do. If I want to look at doing certain things, I need to ask permission. But on the other hand, we provide supports outside of East, and it gets very convoluted. So when a student walks into our district, they go to our CSD placement. When they come to, for human capital and hiring, they go to the human capital HCI office, right? When we're talking about financial supports, we go to our CFO because, you know, East has a CFO budget. They haven't filled it, so we use our resources. So if they need legal counsel, they use our legal support. So for me, it's really not about where does East sit as part of the district. We have programming in all of our schools that are very specific and very tailored to the needs of those students. In no way, shape, or form, hear me say that I want to remove those things from East. It would be foolish for me for a school district, for a building, right, a school that's going to end up with a graduation rate, you know, that had graduation rates of 85%, 84%, right, and whatever this year's graduation falls out. For me to take it in and remove structures and systems in place and a graduation rate fall and come to you all at the board and say, oh, look what happened when we've taken it in the district. So I want to respect and honor the work that's there, but it has to be part of this district's portfolio in essence. And I've never looked at East as not part of the district. But my internal rub comes when I have to ask for permission to place a kid somewhere or put a kid in a place. Those are the realities of the structure we've created. I think there's a way through a collective agreement with an MOA to honor the work that's in place over several years, to say that we're not going to change this, this, and this. Right, I will say there's some things, right? Superintendent Blocker said it. One superintendent, we have a superintendent at East. We have an assistant superintendent at East. We have a chief academic officer at East. We have a budgeted chief financial officer at East. So those are other layers that East has, right? Once again, that none of our other schools have, but I think there's ways that we could be efficient, smart, honor the work that U of R and the East have done for 10 years, say, let's take those practices and let's put them into an agreement moving forward that it is a single district, right? Everything we say is one RCSD. And I never felt as if East was a separate entity. Never looked at it because when I pull up my data, East is in there. Their rate helps my graduation rate. Their ELA performance helps my ELA performance. All, you know, because we're all one. But we've created this structure that has created a divide. And I don't think it was intentional, but I understand in talking to Superintendent Blocker, that they needed to protect East from fidelity creep or the opportunity of the district having a different superintendent and changing the way that practices happen, right? But I do believe through an MOA agreement that we could do over years, that we could put this in no matter who's sitting in the seat and who's here. We could practice those things and keep them in there. The hard part for a superintendent of the Rochester City School District is to make budgetary decisions, look at your data, create superintendent goals that are all inclusive of that, and then to have a different administrative structure. And we have to think of a way outside of that. And I believe at this point in time, that doesn't mean that there are some contracts with the U of R to help support in one way, shape, or form. There's not, because we have contracts with U of R. We heard it, but we have telemedicine that we're all coming into that all come from U of R. I'm not here to say the U of R isn't going to help and that we're not looking for help. What I'm saying is this is the Rochester City School District. We're going to stand on our own 2 feet. We will look for help when we need help. We could do some things through MOAs. We have employee work agreements. We just have to come to terms on that. And I need time if that's the direction that we want to go in, because, as we begin to make budget decisions, as we begin to make board goals, all of these things impact this district, this superintendent, but I have to, once again, seek and go and have some conversations in order for that to do that. So the next steps I'm looking for is I need direction from the board. Like, the board entered this agreement 10 years ago. If they want to enter this agreement again, then I don't need to put energy and people's resources to sit down and have conversation about how we could come together and make something work. And in all transparency, I've already started with a meeting with the East staff. I sat down with them and told them my intentions. My intention is not to do anything that doesn't honor the work of these kids and honor the work of these students, these staff, in no way, shape, or form. But if I'm going to transition them back and the contract ends in 2025, you got to allow me time to plan. You got to allow me time to kind of do that work. And then, if that's not the case, and if we're going to give X amount of dollars to East, I want the board to know in full transparency that other places, right, those are some of the financial stuff that we're going to have to give up and work within. Those are the parameters. That's what me as superintendent of the district is going to have to make and do based on direction from the board. I think we could identify best practices we wish to continue to move forward. If you look at the best practices that are there, right, they have great things that have worked in that school. We'll continue to do that. But like I said, I wouldn't go into other schools and say what they're doing isn't working either, right? We've had high-performing schools that had things do well, right? And East can continue to do that as their own. And then really the work comes with negotiating an agreement with through an employee work agreement. Like, we have memorandums of understanding, we have employee work agreements with our receivership schools. This isn't territory that we haven't been in, but I would absolutely want some level of contract, memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement to say, this is what we've agreed to for the next 3 years from the district standpoint to support East, to make sure they're honoring the work that's done, doing the practice we have. Tremendous amount of work that we need to start to have some conversations and a decision on now, even though that contract ends in the 25th. And I've shared some data, right? And I'm not here there's data, right? I'm not here to battle one data for nothing. I'm not to say, hey, look at 3 through 8 ELA math performance, look at what their levels are, look at what the district's levels are. I'm not saying, hey, look at graduation rate, look at our graduation rate. I'm not saying, look, the per pupil expenditure, they've made a point in terms of why it costs more. I'm here to say, I want them as part of the district. They are part of the district. We haven't spoke that language, but having 2 systems and structures set up as they are, it's going to be, if it wasn't, when they called and said the grass is too long, could you send someone over to mow the lawn? We would say no. Right? Hey, we're going to have, where there's an issue here, could you send a mobile unit? We would say no. Right? Those are resources we get. They call Adrian and say, hey, we need some advice on this situation. And I said, Adrian, say no. right? Like, those are things we would never do to East, but we had this separate kind of governance structure for them that makes it really difficult as a superintendent to act in. And that's what I want the takeaway to be here. That a superintendent, the power is reduced based on our current agreement to a metrics that I'm still held to. So that's it.
Thank you. So I will open it up. Let me just also make a comment. As I reread the contract, in all honesty, the relationship was between the EPO and the board. It wasn't with the superintendent of East High, of the Rochester City School District. It was the board and the superintendent. Nobody from the EPO has come to me to talk to me, number one. Or, now, let me just say this. In the past, this was, under the leadership of Van White. And so I'm not sure what the conversation had been, but I also say, from my perspective, when I was on the board, it was almost as if there was the hands off. That was sort of the perception, that was separate. And so if the superintendents, the previous superintendents, did not get involved with East, that was because the EPO was with the board and the EPO, not the superintendent of the Rochester City School District. So that may be where there has been some misunderstanding in part, okay? But I will just leave that there and open it up to, and what we're doing now is just sort of asking questions and gathering information, but we do have to make a decision probably around the March time frame if we're going to continue with the U of R or if we're going to bring the East back in, because the contract does end in 2025, and we're somewhat late around it now. We should have probably had this discussion somewhere in June. So I'm going to open it up for questions, and we don't have to make a decision now, but we just need to make, if I could, I'll open it up for questions. Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you. And if I've learned anything from having a child who was at East, culture is contagious. And I want to say that this partnership has been very valuable for our district. I think what's been created there is very unique, and you really do have a culture that is contagious there. My daughter started there during COVID in 7th grade, and her initial reading levels were in the 57th percentile or so. And after a year and a half with targeted literacy support, she was in the 95th percentile in a very short amount of time. And I credit that not so much with necessarily how the teaching was taking place, but with the relationships that she had with the teachers and staff there. And there is a level of care that I think could be perhaps scaled district-wide in this district, because you have, I'm not saying that teachers don't care across RCSD, but there is something truly unique about the time and effort that we see teachers able to give to their students. And I know my own daughter benefited from that. And although that she's no longer at East, I loved the focus on literacy. I loved the family group structure, meeting the social emotional needs with that extra time has always been something that I valued. And she got a lot out of that and was able to make some very close friendships with students. We forget that sometimes, how important developing friendships can be for our kids. So having that family group structure really helped to make things more intimate, made things more intimate for her. I loved, in terms of teaching, the programming, excellent. Twice as much time being spent on literacy, double the English time, with the expertise from our partners at U of R. And forgive me for being biased, I'm an alumnus of U of R and went through the Warner School as well. But I do value the curriculum that was being developed. I value the math model, which actually increases literacy as well, developed by U of R and used by many of our suburban communities, including where I teach. The writing workshop model for literacy, I respect all of that. And I know that my own child benefited from it. I don't want to speak for former Commissioner Adams, but his kids have benefited from it and are blossoming. And he 100% was behind the pedagogy that we saw there. You got a pretty good basketball and football team, too. I'll add that. I do like the focus on your ninth graders, especially. I think that's something that has been lacking in the district. I love the best practices. So for me, before we really get into this whole discussion, I think when we look at that July 2025 date, there is initial panic on my part. How are we going to transition back that quickly? Because there has to be some type of transition, as Dr. Paluzzo was indicating. My major reservations, I think, about the EPO is just the sustainability overall. As much as I love the programming there, and I would love to see that implemented in all of our schools, and I think and what you were saying about educational justice is so true. All of our students would benefit from that type of programming. Unfortunately, one of the first things we look for in the success of a lot of our programs is it scalable district-wide? And with our current financial situation and impending financial situation, we're heading towards that cliff, and we're in a great shape right now with CRSA and ARP funds. We've righted the ship because of all of that, in a way. Declining enrollment, et cetera, we know where we're headed. And so I am concerned about the sustainability and the scalability of the program. And I think it is hard to justify sometimes the administrative structure at East when you look at administrative supports that we see in other school districts for the same number of students. And I know maybe that's just a myopic way of looking at things, but it is something to consider. So I'm also looking for advice from our state monitor as well about what would be feasible, what's best practice. But again, I value the partnership, and it is a partnership, and East is part of the RCSD. I would like to see us using a lot of the curriculum that has been developed there. We haven't really seen that used in the rest of the district. I'd love to see us further develop all of these programs and some of the newer programs, especially that the U of R has helped to introduce. Looking at nursing opportunities for students, looking at the medical aspect. Those partnerships with the U of R and with all of our universities in this community are very valuable, and I don't want to alienate in any way this partnership because there is valuable research taking place. There is a level of expertise that's being introduced and is continuing, and I want to see that district-wide. And so I respect the U of R and that partnership, and I hope that we can continue that in some way. I don't know what that transition's going to look like. I wonder about sixth grade and whether or not that should be continued. I don't know the timeline, but I do value the work. I'll make this brief, sorry. I value the work, and I would love to see us continuing those practices, but at the same time, we have to bring East back into the fold. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, President Elliott. So I had the privilege of actually being present at the inception of the East EPO 10 years ago. I'd worked at Freddie Thomas High School before that closed. I'd spent time at School of the Arts. I was with a community-based organization. And so just the intentionality around how the EPO inception took place, and they truly wrapped their arms not only around the families and students and educators in that school community, but also the community-based organizations. We were part of that learning. There was an intentionality that I haven't seen in a lot of spaces. I remember sitting in a big, I think it was a lunchroom, and we all did the Stephen Covey learning, and we did the highly effective people, all that good stuff. And we even had like the student service piece where we would all come together and streamline and identify students that we were all serving and finding that alignment and overlap. Like there was intentionality that you just cannot duplicate without sitting and learning. And so there were some points that were brought up this evening, around transitioning. And I think that something that has been done where you have Karens, you still call them Karens, and all of that type of stuff has to be done. It's not, it sounds good to want to maintain that, but doing it and saying it are two different things. And what that looks like requires a lot of planning. And so I am concerned that we haven't had a pulse on transition. If we know that this is something that we're looking to do, I hear that we need to start now, but I don't even know if now is enough time to make that transition happen in the time frame in which we would need it. Like, if it's something we're looking to do, I would say now is the time to be putting a pulse on what's happening at East. What can we lift? Where's the alignment? Because I do agree, not all models fit everywhere. That doesn't need to happen. But best practices can fit anywhere. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think we have a lot happening here in this district. And we want to be really, really careful about what we uproot. And so I'd want to hear more around what that looks like as far as transition, but also if we were to maintain the partnership, how many, give me that clarity again, how much longer would we have? Like, let's say I'm like, we.
So I think that's, in essence, the conundrum we're faced. Is that we have until July of '25. So the 25-26 school year. So we have a whole year and a half, to get this organized, planned, and right for July 1. Once again, I do think there's an agreement we could come to about what we do and how we do it, right? And I think that's all the great things that everyone has mentioned does not have to go away. We have to figure out a way to negotiate and honor that work. The elephant in the room is it's going to be hard to sit down and get to that if there's no clear direction.
Right.
Right,
So I'm
because-
saying, if,
yeah,
I hear what you're saying. What I want to know is if July 2025 is when the contract ends. And so right now would be the time to get an understanding of where we stand as a board and what direction. I'm very clear on that. What I'm asking is, if right now the collective board did come to a place where we said, you know what, we want to keep the East EPO. And so even though it was set up to expire in 2025, but the decision is to keep it,
That becomes, like President Elliott mentioned, the board and the EPO needs to negotiate, right? And so that's how we resource this, and over the next 18 months is going to be very dependent on where the board falls on this. I don't sit at that table, right? But I want to make it clear that I own the responsibility of all of it. But I don't have voice always in that, right? And then, so that is something that is where it comes, and I do truly believe we could negotiate an agreement that honors that work and keeps this East's success. And no disrespect to the U of R, because they provided anything, right, is not because of the work the U of R is doing today. They've done the work to get us where we need to be. It's because the district is going, our East is going to be successful, the district is going to be successful. That's all I'm saying. And there may be partnership agreements with, but I don't need an EPO for that, and that's where I am.
thank you.
General Counsel, you had something?
Yeah, just one quick note to further answer Commissioner Simmons. There's an element of the agreement and the law that requires that, so the Commissioner of Education plays a role as well. The Commissioner of Education would ultimately have to sign off on any, if there were to be any continuation, so it's not solely up to the board and the
Right.
U of R.
But we're the ones that enter into the negotiations. Yeah, right. Thank you for that. Commissioner Santiago? Oh, excuse me, were you done, Commissioner
Yes,
Simmons?
yes,
All right,
thank you.
Commissioner Santiago?
Absolutely. I have a couple questions. When we talk about this partnership in the EPO, around how much, and I don't know if you have this answer now, but if not, you can definitely reach out later. How much is the U of R investing in the partnership?
It would be very hard to quantify it in a numeric number, but if you wanted to know, like on this page that's in here of the 30 different things we've listed that the U of R does with us, I could certainly articulate that.
Okay. And so then my next question would be more to the administration is how will you guys take on this role, of East? What are you guys' plan as far as that?
So that goes to next steps of the, right? That's why I appreciate the conversation today, because the next step is, and I've already started with the reps and some of the staff at East to have the conversation that, because it was in the plan, right? And they started to panic. What's our future hold? What's this look like? What's going to happen? So I had met with the superintendent Blocker to have some conversations with the staff, just to ease the fact that, no matter what's here, those are our staff. Those are our people. I am not going to disrespect the work that they've put forth. I just need to know if this is going to not happen in an EPO format. What is it from the administration of East, the teachers of East, the district here, that we could kind of get together and say, you know what, we need to continue to have the extended learning day. Okay, let's put that in an agreement. What's going to be the cost associated to that? We want to use the double literacy block. Whatever it is we agree upon, then we bring that forth to the board as an MOA from the district, from me, saying here's what we've agreed to do at East to continue the work that's been done and to make sure it doesn't go off the rails. Because I understand when Superintendent Blocker and I met, that's the fear here has always been that without the EPO, we could be derailed at a moment's notice. I'm willing to say, let's put some safeguards in here so that if you're worried about the superintendency and the turnover in the superintendency, if we had a 3-year MOA that outlined some parameters in it, it doesn't matter who's sitting in here, you'll still be protected at that from that level. We'd still be able to do that. No one could come in and turn that around unless the board agreed upon it, right? And so those are the things that I believe we could do. And I think we could get there as long as we start with having at least meetings once a month and doing that work to get us going.
My only fear, with this conversation is, I mean, one, if it's working, why end it? But then two, if this is something that we had the capacity for, why isn't this going on in all of our other high schools also? When it comes to the CTE program, the SEL time, and things of that sort. So this, there's a lot of questions and a lot of thoughts that I have. As far as the capacity of the district of taking on a school like this and ensuring that that we are sustaining the success that we've seen in this school past the last few years. But then I also ask, if it is decided that we extend, who decides the timeline? Would it be on the board to decide the timeline of that? And if so, is 1 year enough time? I know that you recommended 2 to 3 years. But it sounds like it's just we need a transition period, and we have a lot of transition going on right now alone with the reconfiguration plan. And I think that we have to be very strategic as we think about where our efforts are in this upcoming school year and the upcoming school years. And if we have a school that's working, that's giving SEL time to our students, that has a successful CTE program, why would we turn away from that at the moment when we need to be building on other parts? So I think that's my worry, and I'd love to hear from administration to kind of speak about that. But my thought is, if there is something working in our district that has been an amazing school through the past few years, why would we stop it?
I don't know how I could alleviate this concern any which way of saying I'm not looking to stop. What I'm also going to say is East has CTE programs. They got great programs there. But I'm not going to SOTA, early college, 58, right now that is performing at an equally or higher level to say that you need to do it the East way, right? Because East has a way they do, and they have success there. There are other places that, yes, we could say, hey, is there ways that we can model this as we FMP, someone mentioned Franklin earlier, right? As we go through and do some other things, are there things that we can model and take from here? Yes, absolutely, but it's not to, you can't replicate East all over the district, you can't replicate Soda all over the district, and you can't replicate early college all over, because it fits a group of students. What you can't do is remove all of those successes, and that's what I'm saying. Those things could still be there, all the things you've mentioned. What I'm asking is, think about each of you and what you've said is important from East. And I will ask, do you need U of R and a contract with U of R to accomplish that? That's where I am, because I think we could do it as a district with an agreement.
Thank you, Commissioner Santiago. Commissioner Patterson, any questions?
First of all, Superintendent Blocker, again, thank you for a wonderful presentation. A lot of information in there as far as statistics and data that I really pay attention to. I wanted to be known that I fully support the EPO and the continuation of East and what you've done over there. And I've outlined some reasons why, not in any necessary order, but I was just taking notes as we were going along. When I make decisions up here as a commissioner, I don't make those decisions based on what James wants. I make my decisions based off what the community wants. And everywhere I've gone, where I live, the barbershop I attend, all the conversations around this district, and when we talk East, it's supporting East because of the great things that have occurred over there. Not to diminish anything that the rest of the district has done or not done. But if something isn't broke, we don't attempt to fix it. Myself and everyone I spoken to has no issue paying for education if education is working. And over at East, you are a prime example of our education working, our system working, and it should be used as a model. It was once said, I think Xerox did a study, Rochester is rich in resources, but there's no interconnectedness. Well, we have an example right here, the connectedness with the community in the University of Rochester. I love to see this model in our high schools, where there are other colleges like Nazareth, St. John Fisher, and some of the other colleges in the area, RIT. Do at our high schools or other high schools what you've done at East. Yes, I'd love to see all the resources, the counselors and the psychologists and the social workers, and all the other great things that you've done. So again, I want to also applaud the individuals from the U of R here on being a great partner. And I really hope that my colleagues vote for this extension, because I think we should put more resources in, and I have no problem paying more taxes if it's going to make sure that our kids, our students are successful. And anyone I know, that's the conversation. We don't have a problem, James, with paying more taxes if it's going to make our kids successful and prepared to go out into, the job market, whether that's a college education or whether that's career and technical education skills. Statistics and data. Again, that's what I looked at when I looked at your presentation. And it was glowing relative to where we were back, 2011? 14? Until we are now. Why would we want to, as a board, take an opportunity to destroy that or that to go backward? Charter schools, and we talk about competition. I am very interested in doing something that's different. We talk about bringing kids back from charter schools, and I have no problem with charter schools and no problem with charter schools, but let's compete. And if that means doing things different in our district, having a school not only like Soda or Wilson, but a school like East that kids may come back to because of what they're doing over there, it's like we have our own charter school right here. Why would we want to break that apart? Personally, I don't want to see one thing changed at East or program removed from East. And again, I listened to the superintendent, and he's indicating that that won't happen. But we never know what the future will bring. Right now, we have a $1 billion budget. That doesn't say that that budget's going to be there next year. But if we have an EPO that guarantees that we can continue to work, that's been initiated by Dr. Nelms over there. I'm getting ahead of myself, but when we talk about budgeting, my understanding is that every year, the money that's budgeted over there, he's brought money back or given money back to the district at the end of every budget, and correct me if I'm wrong. Our superintendent, Peluso, we have the school modernization program and the configuration plans that we're dealing with right now. Those things are going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I respect the superintendent. But if we're going to do things that are right, correct, and proper the first time and get it right, then we don't need to add East to that right now as far as reconfiguring what we're going to do over there. My suggestion is to leave East alone. It's working. Yeah, it is a model. No one wants to say that, but yes, it is a model. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it's a good model that we should be using at our other high schools. Superintendent indicated that he needs time. If he really wants to do things right, give him that time. I'm not saying years down the road, maybe it will change over and come back into the district, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's working.
All right,
People, excuse me, I'm almost done.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes to talk. That's
I'm
according to the
almost
laws.
done.
Okay, 5 minutes. All right.
Stability. Our children in this community, that's one thing they really don't even have in their homes, a lot of them. Stability. These kids need stability, and we're going to pull the rug out from underneath them. And that's not good. They're stable right now. East is working for them right now. They've created a family over there. And I'm not a liaison to that school. Hopefully I will be. I've asked for it, but these kids need stability in our community. They don't need any change at all. And last but not least, I always thought before I became a board member and why I ran that, I always thought that the footprint of the district was too large anyway. Even though we've gone from 30,000 down to under 20,000 kids, it's almost becoming controllable now which I always thought there should be 2 superintendents for this district before it happened. Those are some of the conversations because the district was so large. So maybe we can have some discussions around that, surrounding that. Now we've gotten it to a point where it is controllable for a superintendent in East. But there has to be, we say we want to bring those students back, we have to be prepared for that. So if we do bring these students back and we increase back to 30,000 students, we have to, again, be prepared for that. So to have, one superintendent handling, again, 20,000, 30,000 kids, and another one to handle East and doing the fine work along with the University of Rochester over there, I hope and pray that we continue to do the things we're doing, especially over at East. So thank you.
All right, just keep in mind, Commissioner Patterson, 5 minutes that you have to speak. Vice President LeBron?
Yes, and I took a little bit of notes. I do want to point out that the conversation has been kind of focused more on like the emotional, the good stuff happening at East. And I want to acknowledge that, yes, that is happening too. But the reality is that we're talking about a contract and that the state has to be involved in it as well. And the only way that I will personally support it is if the state pens in writing before she approves it, the commissioner, that she would support this, because otherwise we're wasting our time and our breath, because we can say we're going to support it and she can say no, you can't, you have to absorb it. So I would like to understand where the state commissioner is at. That's one. Two, I just want to point out some stuff that was said both in the presentation and throughout the night, and I did take notes for this. So I just want to uplift that the East versus RCSD thing, that culture and that mindset in the district. It's not that other high schools felt like they had to compete with East. It was that they were funded more than any other high school, even our other high schools that mimicked East when U of R took over. And I want to point out that I was there. Out of everybody on this board, I lived through this. So to say that special education students did not get moved because they were in self-contained classes and it was a death trap, I just have to say that the students that were moved are students who have multiple levels of disabilities. And I would not say that they have a death trap. I would say that the district at the time was following, as the other schools do, SPED regulations on certain things. There were definitely times that the district was failing those kids and continues to fail those students. And I will not lie and be like, oh, we're serving them all wonderfully and great. No, we know that we have a consent decree based on our services to SPED. But to say that the transition happened, that's not how it happened. And I had to translate and advocate with many parents who received letters that their child was being moved out of East and put at Edison, mostly SPED students, or that their child was being moved to Monroe. And then, quite frankly, I have to say there were a few SPED bilingual students that came from Puerto Rico, especially after Hurricane Maria, that East would not accept, and that have come throughout the last couple of years that East would not accept, that Monroe had to accept, and many meetings and conversations that have come from those things. And I think that's the issue where other high schools sort of have an issue with why East sort of gets to be a charter school within the district, because this is public education, traditionally public education. There is no charter inside our system. So I just got to put that out there. It's kind of, yeah. But this division is the sentiments that other schools feel is valid when you have a school that you give them the funding. And so I just want to even say to this community that this conversation is not about the positive things that East is doing. I want to acknowledge that they are doing lots of positive things. And to the superintendent's point, we should be able to maintain those things through contract negotiations. Um, the one extra hour, the family time, and so forth. Um, but the reality is that this district cannot afford East as it currently stands and absorbing it at the same dollar amount. It cannot afford to have one separate high school that has its own superintendent and its own cabinet members. No other high school has that. And when I've traveled across the country and talked to other school board members, they look at me like I am insane when I say that I have two superintendents in one district, because we have one high school that created its own model of a micro system within a system. It's insanity, but we can't afford it. And unfortunately, it was never a model because it's not a sustainable model. When you're creating a program model, and for those who know, I'm creating models all the time, and they have to be sustainable financially. And that's the part with East that we have not discussed. And that is directly tied to the data. They're not out of full receivership. And in 5 years, that was the whole point. Like, the state has created this process that if you have a school that is failing And East was failing not just academically, but yes, in that cultural sense. I worked there. There was fights all the time. It was the Wild Wild West. I want to acknowledge that it is no longer the Wild Wild West when you walk in. It feels like a high school that has, adults who are leading, children who are respectful of their space and their school and prideful of their school. And I know that that was not an easy lift. That is that qualitative data that I don't think we'll ever really be able to capture fully out of East High School. But unfortunately, the state looks at it on the academic data piece only. And academically, it is not aligned with as a successful model based on the amount of dollars that we have spent to get to this point, which is year 4, I think, in this or year 3 of the contract extension. So I personally, the only way I would support another East EPO or an extension is if the commissioner herself wants to pen it in writing that the state is 100% supporting this as we move forward. Otherwise, just realize that we can vote one way, the state will still vote another. And lastly, I just want to say, I just have to point out that we don't pay our taxpayer dollars for our properties. We're not paid directly, RCSD. We're dependent on the state, which is why we also don't get to vote like the suburban school districts on their budget, which is why I'm hoping to roll out participatory budgeting. But the whole point is that tonight there was no data presentation about actual numbers of when E started and where they're at with their ELA and math scores and whether they're actually out of receivership for the lower school and of the upper school and each cohort of grades 6 through 12. And that wasn't presented tonight, but that is publicly available data. Anybody can go to the New York State website and pull that data down for East and do some comparisons, because Superintendent Peluso also mentioned that if I do a side by side with schools both within the district, that there are schools performing much better than East, not costing us as much. And I'm not saying that we have to take East's problematic programming model and stuff it into these other schools, because there are schools that are doing it and and are successful in the high schools. It may not be all, but when we take and pull all of our financial resources, what we've created at Franklin is literally East before the East EPO, because we did it to East before the East EPO. We underfunded, understaffed, and under-resourced East High School, which allowed it to crumble to the state that it was, which it got it into the bucket list of either having to close down or be in receivership to a monitor, and got us down this pathway. And for me, quite frankly, this is not a new conversation. We've known for years that eventually this contract was going to come to a halt. I just don't see how the state itself could support this type of contract agreement, if you will, after 5 years and still seeing numbers in receivership. So until the state pens it, that's where my support would go. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. Commissioner Griffin.
Well, I just want to say, I think everything has really been said. There's a lot of information that is missing, and my question was actually what Vice President LeBron was stating about the receivership, and that's what I was going to talk about, but she already talked about it, so I'm not going to rehash it. I think, but at the end of the day, East is a good school. It has come out, it has made some changes, but it is still a lot of things that are up in the air as far as the finances. So I'm going to end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. So let me just ask my colleagues, how do we want to proceed on this? There's some concern about there's not enough information. There are some people who want to continue to support it, some that don't. And I'm going to ask you all, how should we proceed? Commissioner Santiago?
I think that getting really into the finances,
Repeat that?
getting into the finances will really be a good proponent to this conversation. And then also just thinking and looking at the plan of transition. you know, and on if we were to transition, you know, how does this look for the district? How does it look for the students? How does it look for admin? So I think a little bit more information would be useful, but that's my thoughts.
Commissioner Malloy, you got any comments?
Sure. Yeah, similar to what Commissioner Santiago has said, would love to see a plan for transition. Also would love to get input from the state, from our state monitor in particular, and also like to see plans from our superintendent on what potential transition models might look like a 1-year model, 2-year model, 3, what would that look like? And although it's not the superintendent's decision, would also like input from our superintendent on his recommendation. Thanks.
Commissioner Simmons?
Yeah, so the state, yeah, we want to hear from the state for sure. Just looking at some of the additional information, but that transition piece, because I do understand it's not sustainable for an extended period of time, but even if we were looking at, extending it a couple of years, what would that look like potentially? So I want to understand what that looks like, and I think that's about it for me.
Any other comments? Commissioner, Vice President LeBron or Commissioner Griffin, do you have any directives of where we go from here, our next steps?
Well, I
This is,
would ideally, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
no,
Commissioner
no,
Griffith.
you're good. You're good. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Ideally, I would like us to pen something to our state commissioner, Dr. Rosa, to see if she can give us some feedback and thoughts at minimum, as to what she feels we also should be doing, with this agreement and where her support stands, if you will. Um, but yeah, if we can come back, I think it would be helpful too, because I know we're having this conversation at a higher level using language that many people may not even understand. I've been texting folks to explain how they should look at this from this lens, because we're talking about a contract, an EPO, there's a monitor and a receiver, and this falls under very specific education law. Like, there has to be some clarity around what it is, especially we have 2 new folks here too, but there's always new people to this conversation, even from the community. So if we can kind of come back and sort of explain what it is, where legally we do have to do certain things, show some data, because the reality is, yeah, the data is improved, but the whole purpose of going into receivership and being received by a monitor is that you get out of receivership, that you get out of your data improves to the point where you're now in good standing, and then you transition back. And this is the first I've ever experienced or seen where there's a school that went to a receiver and was received and is still in receivership, but now has to come back to the district. I have not had that experience. And if we can ask the commissioner if she's had that experience in other school districts and perhaps see what that looked like or what that felt like or happened and their outcomes, those would be my directives. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Malloy?
Yeah, just one last thing. I would love to emphasize that this has been an investment from our district, and it's been a very valuable investment and partnership with the U of R. And so moving forward, whatever that timeline ends up being with all the data that we have and the decision that we make, I want to make sure that we have a return on our investment. What are our takeaways going to be as a district? What have we learned from East? What practices are we going to make sure continue? Because I think there are so many valuable practices that we can implement elsewhere in the district, and I'd love to see that return.
Thank you. So before, I want to have our state monitor to weigh in on this too, but here's one of the things that I have not heard, and I'll say this to Superintendent Blocker. Not once have I heard from the EPO. Not once has the U of R contacted me as president. That's an issue for me, right? And so so it says to me, I'm not sure whether you're interested in it or not, in all honesty. Nobody has reached out to me from the EPO. So I'll just leave that there, and I don't know the commitment. So we'll open it up to our state monitor for him to weigh in.
Thank you, President Elliott. Again, I want to commend you for having this conversation the first week after getting back from the holiday break, which is not easy. Every student in this district is an investment. They're not an expense. And you got to look at making sure that every student, all 22,000 of them, get the resources that they're entitled to get quality education. Great things are happening at East. Excellent things are happening at East. But because things are working out at East, that doesn't mean that they're going to work someplace else, because the staff has to buy into it. If you tell the staff in other buildings, you got to do this, and they don't buy into it, it's not going to work. As a former superintendent, as a former educator, we went out. We bought programs that we implemented district-wide, and we saw results, good results in some places and not in other places. So you need to have that conversation. You need to do an evaluation, what works, what doesn't work, and make a decision as the board. The superintendent is bringing this to you because he needs time to have that transition. The staff at East is entitled to that transition and to have the time to decide what are they going to do. Again, great things are happening there, but we got to give them the respect to the students, to the families, and to the staff at East. So.
Thank you, Mr. Elisea. So let me just ask this question, because Superintendent Blocker, you had brought this up, and I want to, you had mentioned that, there may be this reaction from the community. What does that mean?
I think that the community, the East community, as I said to Superintendent Pluso today, I think the East community has embraced what we have done and will be very upset if they feel it's being undone. And I do not feel that's what Dr. Pluso is saying. He has stated it multiple times. His goal is not to undo the success that we've had. I think the families in the community will be in an uproar if there is not quality communication and collaboration to make the transition seamless. And I believe both of us are saying the same thing. At some point, certainly East should be back under the same umbrella, but until there has been the opportunity to understand what has taken place and what needs to be preserved, we're not in that spot. And I just want to add two other comments. One, the U of R is here tonight. Dean Payray is here. They are fully in support of the East EPO continuing and are willing to work with the district to see how they could.
Work with the board.
But the district, because, but
The
I'm
EPO is
saying
with
with
the
the
board.
district, it's with the board, but it's also with the district. We should be working collectively for all of our kids. And I strongly believe the board works for what is best for children. So when I
Respectfully,
say
Superintendent
that,
Blocker, the contract is between the EPO and the board. So we have not been as involved, and we have not had conversations with representatives from the EPO, the board, right? We can't put that responsibility on the superintendent. Now, what the contract says is that, aside from the administrative staff, the staff of in East do fall under the district. But that's got to be a conversation that we have with, the EPO has to have a conversation with this board. And that's what we're missing. I don't even know who the contact person is, and I'm president. I just don't have, we don't have that information. And so it would have also been good for them to reach out to us to let us know that they were interested in continuing. They may have talked to you, but they didn't talk to this board. So that's, and we don't have to get into that, but I just want to put that out there, that that's the conversation that we've got to have. We need to hear from the U of R in terms of if they're still committed, because I remember when we first entered into this, the U of R was resistant to it. I think Van went to them 3 or 4 times before Joel Seligman committed to that. And he would only commit when it was a 100%, a full board vote on it. And that's the history of it. I don't know where we are now in terms of the board and its relationship. So that's a conversation I think we have to have. Commissioner Santiago?
I'll also recommend that we also do our best as a board and also as a district to also educate our community and our parents on this conversation and what's going on. And I do recommend that for both superintendents, even as we saw with the reconfiguration plan, we were out there in the schools having conversations with the parents and the teachers. I think even with this conversation, I think that it's important that we do that also, as a board and also as a district to ensure that we are educating at East for the East parents, for the East students, and not from a biased perspective, but from a here's what's going on perspective. And then also, I think that it's important, and one thing I would also recommend is to hear a presentation from the U of R and the people who's over the EPO connection there to hear what they're saying on their end also.
All right, so let me just come back and try to get more clarity about the directive that the board wants us to go in. I heard from Vice President LeBron, we need to send a letter to Commissioner Rosa to find out what her take is on this. Let me just get some more clarification from the board and input from the board of more direction. What about timeline and those kinds of things? What is it that we need to see before we actually make the decision? What information do we need from
Finances.
Superintendent?
Finances. We need to see more figures. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but wait a minute. Just wait, Commissioner, till I finish speaking. And then please.
I'm sorry because you forgot to come back to me. I'm sorry, President Elliott.
Yeah, I didn't
was
see a
supposed to be
hand
at the
raised,
meeting.
Commissioner. She got a hand. Okay, from what I see, I just see me on there now, so I didn't see a hand raised. So I apologize for that. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Right, that's okay.
You done, Commissioner?
Did you want me to continue?
Yeah, go ahead. Because I didn't
Okay,
see.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just see my picture up there, and I didn't see a hand, so I apologize.
I had it up and then I took it down because then
Okay.
you went into the state monitor. So I didn't
Okay.
want to, so, but I just wanted to say we need financial. I want to see more of the financial aspect of what was given out and what's being done with East. I think, as to most of us were saying, we just need more data and more of the financial aspect of how we would play a part in that. Because of what we're going through with the reconfiguration, I think that is important. And because we have a lot of schools closing, and there's a lot of people out there in the community that was concerned about the reconfiguration and their schools closing. It's gonna have a different effect if we don't have all that information and make a sound decision without that information.
All right, thank you, and I apologize again for not seeing your hand.
That's okay.
So Commissioner Griffin talked about the financial piece. We talked about also sending a letter to Commissioner Rosa. Any other thoughts around, and the community piece? Commissioner Santiago talked about the community piece. Any other pieces that we need to, Commissioner Simmons?
In addition to all the pieces mentioned, also what a potential extension might look like if we did go in that direction. What are we comfortable with? Again, I'm not talking 20 years or what have you, but if we decided to go and extend this time frame to have a pliable transition, what would that look like? How would that impact us?
Anything else? Commissioner Malloy?
I'll say, at this time, I would be willing, even with the information that I have at this point, I would be willing, I need more information, but my initial response would be, I'm willing to vote for a 1 to 2 year extension over the current contract.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that that we should definitely have this conversation soon, and definitely have a vote on it soon, seeing that we have to give time to everybody. So whether it's in this month of January or early next month, but I think that it's important for us to have this conversation and vote on this soon. But I think that we have to hear from the commissioner first, ensure that we are educating our community, hear from all sides of our stakeholders, and then make that decision. So if we can fill that in the month of January and possibly the beginning of February, I think that's a pretty good timeline to give people time.
And so whoever the point person with the U of R, we also need to have a engagement with that person as well. And so if there's nothing else, let me just say, Commissioner Patterson?
Yes, I think there should be a minimum with the reconfiguration that we're doing right now, school modernization programs, that a minimum of 3-year extension, on the contract with the U of R.
All right, so I'll just have some last closing remarks from the superintendents. Superintendent Blocker, you have any closing remarks?
Just one thing I want to say, if we do compare budgets, we cannot compare proposed budgets. I want us to compare actual spent budgets, and things that are centrally allocated should be put out to the schools. When they're not centrally allocated to East, but they are to the schools, it appears that the schools have a less amount that each student is costing, but it's simply because the district has picked up some of the pieces.
All right, thank you. Dr. Paluso?
Yeah, I do want to respond to that because I think that has to do with some of the data that I provided here. That is a per pupil cost built on projected enrollment. Those have zero district administrative costs built into it. The hard part for us is that we do support East as well. So you have East EPO administration in their per pupil expense. So you have the superintendent's salary, you have the assistant superintendent's salary, you have what's been budgeted for the CFO, even though it's vacant. All of those add up to the budget per projected student. What you can't quantify is we also have a central administration cost that goes to students. And we know for all of our schools, that's the dollar amount they get allocated based on what is central office. It's hard to do that for East because there are things we do support them on and things we do not support them on. So for teaching and learning, for instance, we have a deputy superintendent teaching and learning. We have some teaching and learning people that work, ELA directors, math directors. Those costs are distributed through a per pupil expenditure for all of our students in the school. They may not be necessary to allocate that for East because they have their own teaching and learning, they have their own accountability. But I have funds in the accountability office that is allocated to all students. I have funds from placement and human capital and council and maintenance. And how do you proportion how much of East uses that to put to them? So when we looked at the per pupil cost, we looked at the per pupil cost straight up, just in the building, number of staff, number of administration, and how much it would cost to staff them as they are. There is no central administration cost in this. The only thing I will end on in addition to this is that we're at 18 months. I think the board needs to say is, what's an appropriate transition time? Is it 2 years? Is it 2.5 years, right? That's where, if it's not the 18 months, how long should this, how far out do we have this conversation? Because then that will kind of get a sense of if you want to, as a board, negotiate a contract with the EPO, then you have a sense of how long that will take. I don't think this was meant to be in perpetuity. I don't think it was meant to be forever. We have to find an end date. And then the other thing I will just ask you to be cautious of is, regardless of what you negotiate, there is going to be an expense associated to it. And what that is going to impact across the district, we just need to be cognizant of that as we move forward as well. And maybe this is the time to make sure that that is in line more with what some of the district structures are.
All right, well, thank you all very much. This has been, pretty tough conversation, but a good conversation. And we will get back together. We'll determine that time. I'm thinking maybe even next week sometime. But we will get back and have more discussion around this, bringing in the EPO to have conversations with the EPO. And then we'll move forward, continue the conversation. I don't need to do a motion to adjourn, do I? Am I good? Do I do motion to adjourn? I say, go ahead. Oh, okay. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right, thank you.
He's going to say yes.